Caution, what you're about to see is for mature children and adults whose lives are grounded in facts, not fiction. It is powerful, educational, informational, and most of all, intended to be motivational. It's only for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, and are willing to act to protect their families and loved ones from what is coming. So sit down, buckle up, and hang on for the ride. Thousands of years before the earth was formed, an event occurred that all religions still refer to today. Can anyone tell me what it was? The war in heaven. What was it all about? Force and control versus free agency and freedom, and it's up to you to decide. The same folks are still involved all these years later. You were there then, you are still here now. You, all of you, are the major players in the story, and you must decide the best side once again. The choice is yours. Freedom and agency versus force and control. Don't let others decide for you. Here in America, in the months leading up to the year 1776 and America's Declaration of Independence from an oppressive and controlling dictator, King of England, who was trying to force oppressive taxes on his subjects here in his American colonies so he could maintain power and control. The vast majority of his subjects here felt helpless to do anything in resistance to his commands. A small few, 5, 6, perhaps 7%, took a different point of view. A very small number of colonists began to talk to their friends, relatives, and neighbors, and discovered others felt the same way they did. The American colonists, too, did not like being forced and controlled by an oppressive government, a king politician telling them what they could and could not do. They understood what freedom was and wanted it for themselves and their families. This understanding came about because of their understanding of the scriptures and what God wanted for them ever since the war in heaven. This tiny 5-6% of the population did not have large resources, money, arms, or supplies. They did have resolve, determination, and right on their side. Ally, a loving Heavenly Father, a God who wanted freedom for his people so they could exercise their free agency and not be forced to do things against their will. Now let's discover if you are among that 5-6%. Let's fast forward, once again, to the year 2015. Today we're going to talk about fear, and I want to scare the daylights out of you, and then show you how faith can overcome that fear and motivate you to do just that. You already know what is going on, but do you know why what is going on? Today let's be blunt, not politically correct. The goal is to pull our ostrich heads out of the sand, to help us soar high like an eagle so we can see all of the horizon and gain a larger view of where we can go and give us the wings to get us there. We're going to move fast, cover a lot of ground, bounce from subject to subject quickly, and toward the end bring it all together in a positive way that you can act upon to save your families and our country and get back what God gave us in 1776. It may seem a little disjointed and the ride may be a little bumpy, but we'll try to smooth it all out before we're done, and we're going to repeat ourselves over and over and over again. Now, there are two kinds of fear, only two kinds, external fear and internal fear. External fear is a direct feeling being powerless to do anything about an oppressive force or authority. It's internal fear. Something troubles you. Facts about some issue give you deep concern. You stay awake at night. Can't stop thinking about it. This kind of concern, this kind of fear, if dealt with properly, can become a positive thing that leads to action. Positive action that solves the problem and eliminates the internal fear and gives you the power to overcome it and replace it with faith, because you have the faith to overcome the fear. Remember I said, lots of folks are aware about what is going on in the world around them, but very few really know why what is going on. Back to the old law of supply and demand. If something is in constant demand by the general public, when the supply of that something is very large, the value is low. When the supply of that something is very small, the value is high. Today, free enterprise operates on this principle to make profits on goods and services. All governments throughout the world use a distortion of this principle to make their citizens dependent on them for goods and services. In other words, a means whereby they can control their citizens. For example, early in our republic, our founders linked the monetary system to precious metals, gold and silver. Among other reasons, this was done to restrict the growth of government. If they didn't have it, they couldn't spend it. This kept government small and confined to what our founders put in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Money, currency, was linked to something of value. However, in 1913, when the Federal Reserve was formed, and now 100 years later, compared to then, is only worth about 3 cents. Again, the old unchangeable law of supply and demand. Some folks know what has happened with the Fed printing money, not backed by anything of value, gold and silver, and some folks are just learning that this is a form of hidden inflation, quantitative easing, that government is using for programs that create dependency so they can control large portions of society. Unfortunately, those in the dependent class don't realize that this dependency is removing their very freedoms given to them by God and our founding fathers in 1776 and allowing themselves to be in total control of and by the government. Now, what else is going on? What is the difference economically between private enterprise and government control of goods and services? Private enterprise companies rely on the profit motive. If what they produce doesn't sell and they can't make money on it, that company won't grow and may even have to go out of business, shut down, or downscale. Jobs will be lost and family and friends will be hurt and displaced. Government, on the other hand, does not produce anything on its own. It takes money out of the free enterprise system for its programs through taxes or by printing funny money, not worth anything by itself, but tells us that it is, and hopes we continue to believe this fairy tale. Government enterprise, for example, The U.S. government owes hundreds of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities they will never be able to cover, even if they doubled or even tripled everyone's taxes. The U.S. dollar is going to fail. Not if, but when is the question. This will be followed by massive inflation. Example, the state of Illinois. Every day, every 24 hours, Illinois must add $21 million to their unfunded public sector pension funds. No state has the legal luxury of printing money like the Federal Reserve, so at some point that state will collapse. California is larger and worse off than the state of Illinois, and is currently in a deficit of $190 billion, with a B, in what they already owe for their public sector and teachers' pensions, and at some point will have to default, admit they are broke, financial collapse. It's unavoidable. However, you can get out of some of the debris if you act quickly. Get prepared, not scared. The clock is ticking. How many of you have shopped for groceries in your life? Every year, the food industry has experienced an increase in total food sales nationally. Obviously, this had to do with an annual increase in total national population. Except, for the past few years, where peak total yearly sales have flattened and even fallen below previous levels, even though the total population has still continued to increase. More people? Eating less? How can that be? It just doesn't make any sense. Why is this? Can it be that folks just don't have as much money to spend on food anymore? Can it be that the money they have is not worth as much as a few years ago? That's right, it's called inflation, the hidden tax increase. How many of you buy toilet paper? Show of hands. Get them up there. Basically, everyone buys toilet paper, except in Venezuela. I remember the first time Hugo Chavez, the progressive socialist dictator of Venezuela, tried to blame evil businessmen of this communist nation for running out of toilet paper, because he issued a government executive order that the grocery stores had to sell it below cost. Remember the old law of supply and demand? What happened? It disappeared from the store shelves. I guess the government expected folks to just use its red tape, since Sears and Roebuck no longer mails out catalogs. I'm sorry, youngsters. I'm sure I lost you on that one. Do you know where your toilet paper and all other grocery items come from? Grocery warehouses. What happens when something interrupts transportation from there to here? What could possibly do that? Why could that ever happen? One answer. A sharp young gentleman who is currently emergency services manager, responsible for all county communications between city and county first responders, sheriff, police, fire, and ambulances, and has a huge file in his office on how to respond to all types of emergencies. Items on the list. And then a number 8 was added. However, that number 8 was placed in the number 3 position, behind earthquakes and fire. While the other 5 items were pushed down to a lower concern. That new number 3 item that took precedence is civil disobedience. Every county in California has done the same thing, and this was before Ferguson, Baltimore, New York, etc. Why? Remember the Watts riots? A relative minor event occurred. Then Watts exploded. Gangs broke into all the grocery stores in the Watts area. Windows and doors were broken. Checkers were beaten up. Cash registers were emptied, and all foodstuffs were stolen. Even toilet paper was taken. This resulted in millions of dollars lost by the food chains in that area. After that happened, all the stores pulled out of the Watts area for over a decade. This resulted in the residents living there then having to commute to outside their home areas to purchase food and other items, or stay there and pay very high prices at gas stations and small stores. If the stores were still willing to risk providing goods that were previously relatively cheap in the large chain stores, if the cities, counties, and states know what's coming, why don't you? Don't even try to tell me that this can't ever happen throughout all of America when, not if, the dollar collapses and massive inflation follows. Chaos and civil disobedience. What would be their motive? Could it be control? Let's go back to the start of our presentation, force versus free agency. How many of you have ever heard of the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission? How many of you have ever read their founding documents? Years ago, folks knew much of what their goals were, and those warnings all seemed pretty far-fetched at the time, something that would never be possible here in America. Not with our Constitution, that God had raised up good men to write, and that no one with any sense would ever try to change. What was the main goal that these 3 groups espoused? One world government. Only 3 words. However, they then went on to declare that they wanted to run it. Oh, that's it. They want to be in control. How are they going to change our constitutional republic of we the people here in America to their idea of a one-world government, pushing we the people out and replacing us with them controlling things? It was decided the 2 main items that had to be destroyed were America's currency, our money, and our rule of law, our Constitution, and our Bill of Rights. To accomplish both these goals, government had to be expanded to become as large as possible and in control of as much as possible, and our money supply had to be expanded to become as large as possible and worth as little as possible. Would have to be turned on its head. President Ezra Taft Benson and church historian Cleon Skousen referred to a one-world government way back sometime in the 1950s. Many years ago, many of you have been around long enough to know and remember what happened in Europe among the 28 countries who gave up their nation's sovereignty to become members of the European Union. and that many of these nations' currencies were purposefully collapsed, giving them no alternative but to join the EU to survive. Then, as a friendly gesture, large monetary loans were given to keep them afloat. Remember Greece? How's that working out now? Whoops. How many of you are aware of the role the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, and the Council on Foreign Relations played in the formation of the European Union and their currency? One large step toward a one-world government on another continent, 28 nations giving up their national sovereignty to join together. How about the continent we live on, the American side of the pond? Our misguided leaders have exploded our national debt, debased our money, and made a too large number of our citizens dependent on government services for food, housing, medical, retirement, cell phones, and on and on and on. It is not sustainable. It will collapse. It is not a question of if, it is only a question of when, and massive inflation will follow. 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years. Who knows when? It can't not happen. Double negative. The plan for over 7 decades has always been to first destroy our currency before a world government can be put in place. To that end, the Amero is already ready to replace our dollar, the Canadian dollar, and the Mexican peso, linking the 3 largest economies of North America's money together. Then in time to expand the Amero to all the countries of South America, and then later on to link it to the euro, so the world will have only one currency, thus leading the way to a one-world government. A brilliant plan, designed to be incrementally put in place, without folks realizing what the end goal is. Incrementally, tiny steps, one at a time, not big and bold and visible to anyone. Sort of like boiling a family of frogs, starting out in a pot of cold water by just turning up the heat a small amount at a time, until we're all cooked. It's well past time we begin to jump out of the pot if we're going to survive. Let's go back to the old law of supply and demand, grocery stores, and food to toilet paper. Multiple cases of items from grocery warehouses, and store them in back rooms, and as the items sold, stores could replenish the shelves from what was on hand. Then grocery stores became more sophisticated and computerized, and now only order just what is needed to restock the shelves with little or no backstock. In other words, once an item is sold off the shelf, the public must wait for another truck to bring more from its warehouses. The grocery store only has a few days' supply of food on hand. If for some reason it can't be resupplied, you're out of luck. If you don't have a personal food storage on hand, you will be out. Our hope is to replace fear and being scared with faith and being prepared, not scared. A squirrel knows to prepare. The average squirrel puts away 125 times its body weight in food every year. How much food do you have stored? Are squirrels gathering acorns smarter than you? Again, if you don't have personal food storage on hand, you will be out. The only thing that will protect you in bad times are the people you know and the skills you have. None of this is a secret. It's all there for anyone who has eyes to see and ears to hear. The question now is, are you among the 5, 6, perhaps 7% that are aware, and are you willing to share it with the 93% who are unaware? So please, share your eagle's wings so they too can see what's coming over the horizon and motivate them to be prepared. Talk among yourselves, just like our colonists did back in 1776. Encourage each other. Don't give up. It's the elders of Israel that will save the Constitution in America if she is to be saved at all. It's all about force versus free agency. Let your faith be bigger than your fears. Don't lose your freedom. Like the parable of the 10 virgins and the oil in the lamps. If you're among the 5 who didn't have it, now's the time to get it. Get it? You must answer this question for yourself. Are you better off having lots of food storage and not needing it, or would you be better off not having food storage and need it? It's the right thing to do. You now know what to do and why to do it. Now, do it. Or somewhere down the road, someone will say to you, I told you so, and you won't be able to respond. It's the right thing to do. Freedom or a one-world government? Are you a frog or a squirrel? Are you an ostrich or an eagle? Have you oil in your lamp? Are you prepared to keep watch with oil and extra oil? We will not know the day or the hour. Be prepared. Do you want freedom, or do you want to be controlled? Will you blame someone else for your failure, your lack of action, or take responsibility for yourself? Are you in the 5, 6, or 7%, or not? Or are you in the 93% being forced and controlled? You must ask yourself these questions, and be prepared to live by your answer. Force or free agency, control or freedom. Your choice. Thank you for your time. We will all be in this together. Let's be prepared, not scared. I'd like to extend a special thank you for the advice, counsel, and encouragement of Bonnie Barton, Ramona Phillips, and Ken Goff, and especially the talent, expertise, and time of Anna Maria Unger, who helped bring this together and made this presentation happen. I express all these things and share my concerns with you in the name of my mentor, my teacher, my Savior, my friend, Jesus Christ. Amen.